Well, we made it here. We had a great flight. We saw Pirates of the Caribbean, and we really enjoyed the ride by Cool Rides. Worked out great. Gave us more than enough time to be able to get settled in and to enjoy our flight. Well, we've managed to get our luggage, so we're very happy about that. Now they're going to put us on a bus and we're going to go to the boat. This is the engine room, where we can see how we're being moved along on the river. I will tell you, it's very quiet. It was very nice last night. The other ship I was on was much noisier than this. And here we have, it has to be one of our people who's working on it. Like they're going to get ready to set the plank down so that we can go to Oak Alley and see what's going on there. This is what we're staying on. You know, it's big, but it's not bad. It's a lot bigger than anything else I've ever stayed on. But it's quiet. They give us a lot of choices when it comes to how we want to take our meals. Okay, we're on to Oak Alley Plantation. This is Oak Alley, and we're going to their mansion there. So we're going to proceed in. We're going to take the tour and see what it's like. This is what we walked up in order to get here. And this is why it's called Oak Alley, because it has oaks on either side.
You're coming from all over? All different states?
Oaks that had been planted over 100 years earlier. He realized he had finally found the spot that would bring together his young wife's love of entertaining and his own love of working the land. So he acquired this estate, and then he set about to build her a dream home here. Selena's father was a well-known architect. He's the one who created the original French Market and the Café du Monde in New Orleans. Have some of y'all heard of those places before? So her father is the one who also created this beautiful example of the Greek Revival style of architecture. It's hard for some people to imagine living down here in the South without air conditioning, but Selena's father added many features to this house to help keep them a little bit cooler during the heat of the summers. And some of these included a 13-foot deep veranda surrounding the entire house. There are 12.5-foot ceilings here and solid brick walls all around us that are 16 inches thick, very well insulated. The house took nearly 2.5 years to complete, using mostly materials found here on the plantation grounds or manufactured here by the slaves. And the only elements brought in from outside this area were the slate for the roof, the marble that once covered the floors, and then the glass, nails, and hinges. Once everything was finished, Miss Selena, she could hardly wait to come here and start hosting those elaborate dinner parties. Now look around you. Just imagine the scene that greeted the guests at those dinners. We are told this parlor might have been where they would begin and end the evening, just relaxing, you know, discussing the news of the day. Well, among people sitting in this room would have surely been eligible young women from this area. They were fresh from finishing school, being courted by their boyfriends. One way a young couple's parents or chaperones could closely keep an eye on them if they were sitting here was with this federal bullseye mirror we have hanging on the wall. You see how that mirror is shaped? The parents could be sitting out in the hall, and that mirror allowed them to view the entire room at all times. You got a girlfriend? Oh boy, listen up, parents. Here's another way young people were kept in line, a quarters candle. When a young man would come courting a young girl, the girl's father would light the candle first. Then he would raise it, or he'd lower it to the height he felt appropriate as the young man arrived. If the girl's father felt this young man was a good prospect for his daughter, he would set the candle up high. That meant it took a long time to burn down. On the other hand, if he disapproved of it, he'd set it all the way down to the bottom like this. Get the picture, huh? Everybody knew when the candle burned down to the top of the candle holder, it was time to say good night. It's time to get out. So if any of you have young daughters or granddaughters back home, we sell these in the gift shop after the tour. Wavy panes of glass in the windows. 85% of the windows you see here today are still part of the original glass that Jock and Selena looked through nearly 200 years ago. Now they would have been seated at a table very similar to this one. This is 16 feet long, it's mahogany, and it dates back to the 1830s. You might have noticed walking in, most of the chairs from this era seem rather low to the ground. Well, that's because the average height for the gentleman of that time was 5 feet 4 inches short, and the average height for the lady was even shorter, under 5 feet. The glass containers on the table, we have 2 of these. These are called fly catchers. They would have been filled with sugar water or molasses and then a touch of poison. Flies and mosquitoes would have entered these through the bottom, and then they would get trapped inside while everybody was eating. Imagine that sight. But Selena was a wonderful hostess. We're talking about an uppity class lady. She would have taken a delicate handkerchief like this, drape it over each flycatcher, so that none of her guests would have to witness the dying process. Now this large object hanging over the table is called a concha, and it's also known as a shoe fly fan, because like the flycatchers, this helped to keep some of the insects away. But most importantly, it helped to keep Selena's dinner guests cool and comfortable. The fan was attached to a cord and pulley system. From the moment everyone entered the dining room until the moment they left, the fan would be kept moving over there steadily, back and forth. And it would swing just fast enough to keep the air moving. Not so fast that it would blow out all the candles they have on the table sometimes. On those especially warm days and nights we have, they would have also had a large chunk of ice sitting in a dish on the table. And many people don't realize that ice was available down here in the south of the 1800s. It was carved from the glaciers and the ice flows up north, packed in straw or sawdust, and then shipped down that Mississippi River to be purchased by these affluent southerners. Well, the combination of the air being cooled by the ice and then the breeze created by the fan added up to what we call an 8-to-bell air conditioner, even back then. Today at Oak Alley, we still have invoices on file which tell us Mr. Jacques, he spent a great deal of money on ice. Sometimes they'd have to put a large tub of ice underneath the plank just to keep the body cool, and then they would drape mosquito netting around the bed. And all the mirrors in the house were covered when someone died, due to the superstition that if they were not, the spirit of the deceased would get trapped inside them, making the house haunted. Today we sometimes call that first room our multi-purpose room. Imagine having a room like that. Now right across the hall up there from that first room is the children's nursery, and the children were watched over all night in those days by a nanny, whose job it was to make sure all unwanted guests, such as snakes, insects, rats, and raccoons wouldn't come in through those open doors and windows at night while the children slept. Right now, please follow me single file up the stairs. Let's go take a look at those rooms. And
This is the bedroom with the rolling pin bed. So they use the rolling pin to take care of straightening out the mattress. And of course you've heard the other reasons why they had this room. Here's the children's nursery.
They go out of that pretty fast.
This is on the second floor of Oak Alley. The area right here discusses some of the people who owned it. And these are some of the pictures of the most recent owners who opened up a foundation. See the old ones, how dark they are.
Have a life expectancy of 600 years. So we like to think of them as in midlife right now. Now when Jacques and Selena lived here, they could stand on this gallery where you're standing and actually see the Mississippi River from this point. The levee that they had built and maintained with slave labor was only about 5 to 10 feet high. The levee you see there is about 40 feet high. It was constructed in 1929 by the Army Corps of Engineers. The only view we get is the top of a ship going by. As you can see, the top of that boat out there. Is that the Mississippi Queen?
Yep.
Today, yes. Sediments and impurities. That was a very difficult job to do. Especially when I show you how big that skimmer was. And it was a never-ending job, too. You see, once that batch was cooked, there was always another batch of juice to start boiling and cooking down.
You can see how they're holding up some of the oak trees.
Front gallery. We just painted the ceiling a light blue because we were told it keeps away some of the spikes.
Okay, now this used to be the house where the kitchen was. It's now a garage.
He's the man who ran the plantation when the owner was not available. Today, that is the private home of our administrative director, Mr. Zeb Mayhew Jr., and that entire building is divided into only 4 rooms. The plantation bell, right down here to your left, was cast in Pittsburgh in 1848. And that bell regulated like here on the...
This was the
Today,
plantation bell.
We still use that bell to signal the start of a new tour, which just goes to show you how long a southern bell can stay useful. That's in the script. And although slavery and Oak Alley's authentic slave quarters have long disappeared, the significance of this very real part of history lives on. Our continual research efforts have lately revealed the actual location of our plantation slave quarters. Through the process of thermal imaging, we have been able to pinpoint the exact location of the first of 20 slave houses, leading from this point on to the fields beyond. These slave houses were 10 on each side, facing each other. They housed 104 field slaves and their families. Records tell us there were 20 house slaves as well, but tradition suggests that they were housed either in the big house or nearby to better serve members of the family. As you exit down this alleyway, there's a marker to the right past the 3rd tree. It displays an image of what the slave quarters would have looked like. It shows you where the manor house was, the sugar mill, and other buildings. But most importantly, it lists the names of all the slaves we had at that time with their ages and their estimated values.
I've been told that this used to be where the kitchen was. And now these are Model A's that they house in here, which are in beautiful condition. And of course you've got the old Texaco sign. Of course that harks back to when we used to see all those little balls rolling around when our parents got gas. That tells you how old I am. We've got a big old barge. Look at those barges. Going up the river.
It's 14 of them.
It's pushing a lot. Well, we're going to go back on board ship for just a little while, because then we're going to another mansion. We cannot believe the weather. It is absolutely terrific. Thank heavens I'm layered.
Okay. Stay right with me.
Are there any maps around?
This is Laura House.
Our relationship to New Orleans and Baton Rouge and all that.
Questions anytime during the tour, we do invite you to do that. This is a Creole plantation, and when we're talking about Creole, we really mean the non-Anglo-Saxon and non-English speaking culture that flourished here in Louisiana before this became part of the United States. 2 days ago, Saturday, December 20th, in 1803, Louisiana became part of the United States. And after that, lots of Americans began to arrive here along the river trying to settle in Louisiana. And the Americans thought that they were in a foreign country. And they were absolutely right. This part of Louisiana would remain foreign in its culture, in its tradition, and even in its language well into the beginning of the 20th century. And this Creole culture is greatly influenced by 3 very different groups: the Native Americans, the West Africans, and the Europeans. And all of these people lived together here at Laura as elsewhere in South Louisiana. Our big house behind me was built in behind me, behind me, was built in 1805, right in the middle of an Indian village. The Indians were not expelled from the property. They were incorporated into the plantation culture. They lived and worked here until around 1915. In the 1720s, the French began importing slaves from West Africa, from the region today comprising the countries of Senegal and Gambia. And there are, of course, many of their descendants who still live here up and down the river. And this would be run as a sugarcane plantation for nearly 200 years by two European families. Laura's was the first. They were French, and their name was Duparc-Loucoule. The second family was German. Their name was Wagespack. I have $1 in my pocket if you can spell it. Well, the Wagespack family came to Louisiana from Germany in the early colonial period, and they very quickly became French themselves because that was the dominant language and culture here. Well, they would speak French in this house until they sold and left it in 1984. Creole houses are usually built raised up and to face a body of water, and in this case, it's the Mississippi River. It's back there this time. Yeah. All right. The house is raised up because the levee back there was not built until 1929. So the river flooded every spring. But they also raised the house up because it gets hot in Louisiana in the summertime. And with the house elevated, you usually had a nice breeze blowing across the water, funneled by the trees into the house. And if you notice where they put the big windows and doors, you can open the whole thing like a pavilion to let the air flow through. Under your feet, there is no bedrock here for nearly a mile. All of this dirt is silt and clay deposited by the river, and it's wonderful for growing sugarcane and banana trees and live oak trees and just about anything else, but it's not stable for building big houses. All of these brick columns and walls you see under the house go 8 feet into the ground. Beneath the surface, there are 72 subterranean pyramids holding this house up, and that's why it has not moved in nearly 200 years. In the early 20th century, you could drive by on the road or float by on the river and look at a house out here and know right away who lived inside. In 1916, 85% of the people on the river were still speaking French almost exclusively. Quite a few of our ancestors did not like the other people very much. They called them les Américains, the Americans. And if you passed in front of a house that was so vividly colored, you bet they were speaking French inside. If the house was white, English was being spoken. And they wanted everybody to know there were two very different worlds out here, two cultures, and this was not part of the other one. Well, in 1916, the English speakers in the state legislature forced through laws that forbade the speaking of French in the public schools and in the government. And by the mid-1920s, most of the brightly colored Creole houses had been painted white. The French people who lived inside, who had run Louisiana politically, socially, and economically for 2 centuries, began to realize that they would have to assimilate with the Americans. Now, when a group of 30 investors came to save this place in 1993, the house had been sitting here empty for 9 years. It was empty except for a whole herd of cows that lived in the basement. And they left about 2 feet of souvenir that had to be shoveled out. And once that was accomplished, they began scraping off white paint, found these colors, and repainted them all. And the house is being restored to the way it looked in 1905, when the second family added all the Victorian elements to the front. If you take off the double staircase and the little portico, and you imagine a simple staircase coming straight down the middle of the front porch, you then can see classic Creole architecture. Now, this is probably not the kind of house you have in your neighborhood at home, but it is exactly the same thing you find in the Caribbean, because in the islands we're much the same climate, but also the same ethnic and cultural blends among the Indians, the Africans, and the Europeans that we had here in South Louisiana. Now, for most of our visitors, this house does not represent what they think a plantation house is supposed to look like. It's not grand Greek Revival architecture with big white columns. That would come along about 35 years after this house was built. This is better thought of as a big French colonial farmhouse. Our tour at Laura is a bit different from most museum houses because it's not a tour about a house. It's not a tour about furniture. It's really a tour about the people who lived here, and we know a lot about them. In the French National Archives in Paris, we found 5,000 pages of documents about this plantation and Laura's family. But in St. Louis, we found Laura's memoirs. She was the great-granddaughter of the founders of the plantation. After having sold everything she owned here in the late 19th century, Laura moved with her husband to his home in St. Louis. And it was there in the 1930s that she would begin to write down for all of her children everything that she could remember about her life here. So Laura's story is about 4 generations of her family, the women, the children, the slaves, the workers that you hear on your tour today. So once again, my name is Joseph. This is Linda. We're going to be your guides today. And ask questions, take pictures. At this point, we are going to divide the group in half, so we can move much more easily to the house that way. You are welcome, ma'am, to roll the wheelchair inside the house if you can. Okay. If you have someone who can help you up the stairs and carry it up for you, you're welcome to roll it in the house if that's better. The Senegambian slaves imported by the French in the 1720s. And if you did not own such a slave, you could rent one. And this is exactly what Guillaume Duparc did to have this house built. Now, the rented slave was brought here to the site from New Orleans. When he arrived, he was given the task of building a maison de 30, a house of 30. And these men were such skilled builders and artisans that you would give them a number, and they would then build your house based on the number. But how? Well, if you look back up here, this big beam, you can see that there are lots of axe marks still in the beam. Right up here in the corner, there's a wooden peg, and right next to it here, we have a carved Roman numeral 1. Y'all see that? Moving to the right, here we have the number 2. Here is the number 3. Then we come to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way to 30 on the other end of the house. So there are 30 horizontal beams with 30 vertical posts. They interlock in the inner walls of the house with the wooden pegs. There are no nails used in the construction of this house, and that gives you a house of 30. Now, the rented slave would spend nearly a year in the swamp, supervising a team of slaves in the cutting, the drying, and the numbering of the wood. They then brought all the lumber back here on a wagon, where another team of slaves had prepared the foundation. In a letter to one of her cousins in France, Laura writes that those men assembled this house. They put it together in 11 days. All they had to do was to line up the numbers, put the pegs in, and voila, a 200-year-old prefabricated Lincoln log house. Back in to the bottom, level it all out, fill it in with bricks. There are bricks going out 12 feet on each side of the house to buttress the whole support system. Okay, then they're building those 72 brick pyramids to come up into these columns and into these walls. Now, these slaves knew from building houses similar to this along the Senegambian River in West Africa that capillary action was going to bring water up from the ground into the bricks. Now, this does 2 things. First of all, when the wind is blowing through in the summertime, the evaporation of the moisture, you have a cooling effect, but you also don't want the main wooden beams of your house sitting on the wet brick. So in Africa, they invented these wonderful things called evaporating boards. Now, you do have to replace these every 25, 30 years or so. But what this does is allow breathing space so that when the wind blows through, the moisture evaporates so the main beam of the house is not sitting on the wet brick. Along the 1830s, 1840s, the Americans, when they're coming into Louisiana building houses, decide they want to get away from these old African building traditions, and guess what? None of those houses are left. These older ones from the late 18th century, early 19th century, that are ones that are still standing here intact. All of this wood here above your heads is original to the building of the house. That's a virgin cypress. These trees were nearly 1,000 years old when they were cut down. They were enormous. They looked very much like they're actually cut. It's the very reason that there are not very many of these houses left in Louisiana, because lots of them are just torn down for the scrap lumber, because the lumber itself is much more valuable than the house itself. There's the child's mother, a slave woman named Anna. Elizabeth had just sold a woman away from her baby. Emile, Laura's father, came out and tried to stop the transaction, but his mother told him, "This is none of your business. These are my slaves. I'll do as I please." Elizabeth back in the house to count the money. On the spot, Emile paid double to buy Anna back to keep her with her child. For this defiance, Elizabeth would never speak with her son again. She died in New Orleans, nearly 20 years later. This all happened in 1862. Emile left to fight in the Civil War. He was gone for nearly 4 years. When he came home after the war, Emile had no idea what he would find. The house was still here, burned to the ground. But as he rode his horse through the front gate, the very first person who ran from the house to greet him was Anna, the slave. She had stayed here throughout the war, taking care of Emile's family, and she begged to be allowed to stay and work here. Anna nursed Emile through his final illness. She stayed with Laura during the 10 years that Laura ran the plantation. And when Laura was married in New Orleans in 1891, 13 years after the beginning of the Civil War, Anna, the ex-slave, was there at this wedding as a member of the family. There were narrow window doors called brisées, which would bring the breeze into the house. Now, how do you get into the house then? Well, if you come to visit here, the gentleman and lady of the house are going to greet you on the main gallery. And as a guest of the gentleman of the house, regardless of your gender, you are first invited into the gentleman's parlor over there. And that's also his bedroom and his wife's bedroom. I'm sure you'd all agree it's much more intimate to receive in the bedroom first. And then you're escorted into the salon as a guest of the lady of the house. You're first invited into the lady's parlor over here. Well, that is also her bedroom and her husband's bedroom. And then you're escorted into the salon. Well, that might be confusing for you. But these people did not live in their houses the same way that you or I live in a house today, because the house was not divided by sex or by gender. It was really divided by roles and relationships, and those would always be determined by the role that you played in the hierarchy of the family business. So it was never necessary for the gentleman and lady of the house to be a married couple. Typically, a brother and sister would play these roles, with the brother in that end of the house and the sister in this end of the house. But if you have brothers and sisters, how many of you do? Imagine how much fun it would be to live in the same house with them and their spouses and their children from generation to generation. And if you do that, you can do exactly what the Waggisback family did and chop the house into many pieces and move it all over the yard. This front door, like I told you, did not exist. It was added in 1905 to give the house a more American facade. Well, the door was added and the door was locked. And it stayed locked until 1924, 19 years later. One Sunday afternoon, everyone in the neighborhood was down the road at the church for a picnic. But suddenly the weather got very bad and everyone ran inside the church. But the tornado completely destroyed it. The roof fell in on itself and there were 8 people killed. Pulled from the rubble were the bodies of 4 members of this family. They were brought back here, laid in the main parlor for a wake and a funeral service, and because they died so tragically in the church, the Archbishop of New Orleans came to preside. He arrived here, went somberly through the front doors, followed the coffins out after the service, and those doors were closed and locked behind him to stay locked until that family sold and left his property in 1980. Met very first people in the tour. Louis was a lot like his father. By the time he was 19, he had killed 2 people in duels. The sheriff was after him, so his mother sent him off to France to a military academy, hoping to calm him down. Well, Louis stayed in France for 5 years, and he had a wonderful time spending his mother's money at the gambling tables. He also liked the ladies a little bit. Well, he finally met one who was just like him. Her name was Fanny Rucker. They were married in France, came back to Louisiana, and they were called the Marquis and the Marquise of the River Road because of the great parties they gave in this house. Life for them here was perfect, except for one small detail. Louis's mother had given the presidency of the business not to him, but to his baby sister Elizabeth. Louis and Fanny would have only one child, a daughter, and they named her Elisa. She was the first grandchild born in the family business. Very important because you had to have a child to secure your inheritance, someone to pass it on to. They decided to make their daughter perfect so that one day she could be president of the family company. All the stress and pressure to be so perfect culminated when Elisa reached adolescence. She began to break out with pimples on her cheeks, and her parents were horrified. They refused to present her to society. Seeking a cure, they went to France, and there in Paris a doctor assured them he could cure the acne, so he gave her an injection in the arm, and she died the same afternoon, several months before her 102nd birthday. Now this man, right back here in this photograph, is named Emile. He's Laura's father. He's the son of Elizabeth, the wine lady you met downstairs. Emile was 14 years old when his mother began to call him a Negro spoiler. She thought he was much too liberal in his treatment of the slaves. He would never make an effective plantation manager, so to toughen Emile up, Elizabeth sent him to France to a military academy where he would stay for a total of 20 years. One day, he received this message from his mother: "You're 34, you have no children, and you will never be president of this business." And so came quickly back to Louisiana. He brought with him this French engagement fan hanging on the wall. This is what the young Creole gentlemen would give their ladies in the 1850s. We made Archinard. Ladies, have a look at her waist. And Desiree would suffer 3 miscarriages before Laura was born in this room on Christmas Eve in 1861. And when Laura was born, her father finally came fully into his inheritance. In today's money, nearly $7 million. Only back when Laura knew it, you see that giant U shape I told you about a few. Slaves and descendants of slaves lived in those cabins as late as 1977. As astounding as it may sound to you, there are people still living in slave cabins, only a few miles up the road. You can pass them actually in the bus on the way down here from Ocala. The people who lived back there had only one way to maintain anything of their African culture. They told picturesque stories in Creole French, and the main characters in these stories were animals. Two most famous in Louisiana were compère lapin, compère bouki. Lapin is of course the French word for rabbit. The bouki is a Senegalese Wolof word which means the stupid hyena. The bouki was the bad guy in the story. He would chase the rabbit all around to get the rabbit in trouble, but the rabbit would always triumph in the end. Many of these stories would be written down in 1871 by one of Laura's neighbors, a man named Alcée Fortin. At the same time, over in Georgia, an American named Joe Chandler Harris, writing down the same kinds of stories in English. His published work is called The Tales of Brer Rabbit and Brer Fox. These stories, though, did not come from the American South, not in French from Louisiana, and not in English from Georgia. They were actually brought here by the Senegalese slaves back in the 1720s. And today in Senegal, almost 300 years later, on the other side of the world, you can still hear those very same stories being told. In fact, if you went into a 3rd grade classroom and opened a textbook, you would find the school children learning their grammar and their spelling using the old tribal stories of the hyena and the rabbit. And we have reprinted in English the Louisiana story of Compère Lapin, Petit Bonhomme Gaudron, which you may know as Brer Rabbit and Little Tar Baby. We do have those available. So, thank you all very much for coming to visit with us today.
Well, Paula, this was the kind of weather that you told me was going to be here. The fog in the morning, misty, some rain, and that's what we've got. We're going to be getting into St. Francisville in just a little bit, but it's just beautiful. We're on the observation deck. And as you can see, it's very kind of foggy, lightly foggy now. This ship, they've got a small pool. This is like an observation area. And gives you the ability to be able to sit and see the area. Then you can, there's about 5 different floors to this thing. It's nice and comfortable. Had some rain this morning. This is the Calliope, and this ship is going in for a month-long service. You can tell that these ladies are going to get repainted. But the Calliope is loud because, of course, it's steam. Right now you can tell we're in the very shallow part of the Mississippi by looking at the wave action. So we can still see how quickly, we can still see the lines of the water being churned up by the paddle wheel. We have 2 twin beds. And you can tell that for some people, if they wanted to have a 3rd one, there's the 3rd twin bed up there. I'm glad I didn't have to climb up to take this cruise personally. And I like the fact that we also have a nice sized closet. See where that curtain is? That's all of the closet there. The bathroom is cozy, but actually it's not too bad. They've got a medicine cabinet. You can see you have your sink, your toilet, and you have a very abbreviated shower, but it works great, so I have no complaints. This is that mirror, supposedly, at this house that is haunted. This is the back portion of the Myrtles, which is supposed to be one of the most haunted houses. This is where a black slave supposedly put oleander in a cake and killed 3 of the people in the household, and that many of the individuals are still staying around here. This is some of the front portion of the Myrtles. Now this is, again, supposed to be this haunted place. Now they would not let us take pictures inside, but it is. And you have all of these trees with Spanish moss. And they're rushing us because they want us to get on the bus. This is supposed to be a bed and breakfast also. And they're supposed to have filmed, I think, The Long Hot Summer or something, or Cat on a Hot Tin Roof here. It'd be interesting to see what we see. All I know is it was really warm inside when we were going through the tour. Need to get back on the bus and see the next house. Alright, there's Murphy.
And it is owned now. This is privately owned. This is on.
Now we're going to Rosedale Plantation in Historic Gardens. Well, we're on our way. You can see how the trees and all the Spanish moss, pretty much like Oak Alley. You can see how this is going to be a larger mansion, that's for sure. As we approach, I see that we've got a spot where on either side there's statues greeting us. And it looks like previously they may have had a different open gate than the one they're using right now. But there is the other statue right over here. We have other statues that keep on greeting us as we go up this long way. If you look from here, you can see that where we came from was very near this. Do you see the white gate there? So they used to pull their horses in and come here. Even had their own doctor's office that was right before you would get to the main buildings, which we're just starting to come up on now. And as you can tell, this is a big place. Any way you look at it.
According to Miss Lucille. If you have any questions, though, about some things I tell you, you can ask me, and I'll catch you up. This room, well, first of all, 90% of the furniture in the house that you see today is original to the family that originally had the house. Now, in that original furniture was this hat rack over here in the corner. It cost $14 on the first order of furniture that was delivered here. The whole shipment of 22 crates cost $925. The 3 pieces in the room beside that were added during that restoration by the woman from Houston, Texas. Not original to the house. Also, the wallpaper is not original, but it has ties to that original. In 1960, they removed layers of paper from this wall and underneath find evidence of a panoramic scene that is recognized as being French. Okay, y'all are with the group then. Okay. Well, French authority identified that original paper, but it could not be remade, so they searched in Paris and found this paper in the gallery and placed it on the wall here. It is on 18-inch linen squares that you hand paint the wood blocks, stamp the cloth, and place it on the wall like you're building a large jigsaw puzzle. It depicts the story of Charlemagne and his knights, and the current value of this paper is $100,000. And we ask that you not touch any of the fabrics or the wall window treatments in the house for that very reason. Also, we ask that there not be any flash photography inside the house. Okay, we're going to go into the dining room. You can bring your chair with you. Okay, I can bring it with me.
Some of the wallpaper that they're saying is now worth $100,000. These are some of the dishes that they used.
Tea. Very good. Thank you.
See, this is, I don't know how well you can see it, it's a Delft set.
Because they used to have the hand perch systems on the top.
Yeah.
It doesn't have room even for the set one.
They're saying is some of this is the, again, the stoneware that they used. Of course, we always see cotton.
On the 22nd of February, which amounts to place something Fort Wine.
This was like the pantry area.
1851.
Oh, thank you. 1851.
And they're saying that these are dishes, cracked, that they found in a trash pile, which helps dishes and stoneware that were used at this mansion. Here are some of the utensils. And of course their books. And then what was explained to me is that we are now looking at the staircase used by the slave help to go up and down to the attic. Although they say that the slaves did not live in the attic. There's a small desk. And over here they've laid out some of the clothing that the children had. And of course, the canopy.
To drape the mosquito netting on the bed. When the mosquitoes...
This was where they put their children when they were first born. The clothing that people would wear. And now this is from the second floor of this mansion, to be able to see what it looks like. There's the doctor's house. And as you can see, lots of Spanish moss. Saying this is what's left of what was the conservatory, which she used in order to winter her plants, because she loved her garden. And supposedly brought a lot of stuff back from Europe.
When everybody's finished up here, we'll come in.
Okay, this is St. Francis, and this is one of their
Some of
cars.
us haven't gotten home yet to turn out. Now, right up here to the right is an old house. It's called the Widow Ross House up here on the hill. And the story is that the Widow Ross entertained both the church and cemetery. The courthouse to the left. This is one of our beautiful sights, and we used to take people there when we have time to the Grace Church. It's an old church.
Up these houses are built. Day, and we are basically all just on the boat today. Although you can see that there's a go ahead. There's a whole bunch of barges. This one looks like a bunch of coal in that it is misty in the morning. It was beautiful to see the trees and to see the mists over the Mississippi and through the trees. And other than that, I'm going to relax. I'm going to see Santa Claus 2 in the theater and enjoy the day. Oh, we have reached Natchez, and we're staying on the Mississippi Queen.
Merry Christmas.
This is the Delta Queen. Well, what I have seen about the Delta Queen is it's a smaller boat. It has more concentrated on sleeping accommodations and much less on communal areas, where the Mississippi Queen that we're staying in is much more communal areas, but they're docked right next to each other. And this is Christmas Day. Found out this morning that I shouldn't have had breakfast. And now that we're in Natchez, in the afternoon we're going to see a bunch of homes, but we may do a little bit of looking around because we're so close to shore. I'll show you. Even though we're on the Delta Queen. We have, we're right near, we're going to take a look at maybe some of the old part of the city of
Good morning, steamboaters. For those of you who would like to go on our Pilot House tour, we ask that you please meet by the Grand Piano in the Grand Saloon at 9 a.m. or in 10 minutes. Once again, the Pilot House tour will begin in 10 minutes. For those of you interested, we ask that you please meet by the Grand Piano in the Grand Saloon for the Pilot.
Well, we just got off the boat, and we're taking a look at Natchez before we see all of the big houses. You can see that this is not a new and original. This is our Mississippi Queen that we're on. And after having seen the Delta Queen, I think I want the space that's on the Mississippi Queen when I'm deciding that I'm going to travel. There's a lot more communal space here. And because of the size of the cabins, I think I'll go for the communal space. Christmas time. It's probably because it's one of the most populated. Looks like it's called the Isle of Capri. Farther, I think this is one of the gambling boats that they have on the river. Our walk, what we're seeing is Rosalie, which obviously is a historic home. Much, we just can't take it. We need some activity. But we're going to see some homes this afternoon, but we're taking our walk in Natchez because personally the food is too. This is one of their cottages, they call it. And when you look at what the big houses look like, it makes sense. I tell you honestly, I'm really glad that I'm wearing my my flat shoes, because you can tell one of the trades they have is they'll take you on a horse-drawn carriage ride if you want.
They give you nice little strap uniforms to wear while you're living there.
Yeah. Okay, if that's the jail, then is that the courthouse?
That's the courthouse, yes ma'am. Built in 1820.
Yeah.
And remodeled in 1925, neoclassical style. It's still a courthouse today.
Well, see, and the one thing that I always look for is when you see a courthouse, next thing you're looking for is a bailiff's bondsman's office.
That's right.
And whenever you see the law offices, you know that they're near the
law
courthouse.
office is right over there.
Right, I saw one.
This is our old jail to the right, built in 1891, the Queen and Victorian style. See those bars in the windows? Yeah. It's almost too pretty to be a jail. Now today it does now house the 4 supervisors. People driving around say that belong up in there sometimes. Schoolhouse, a theater, once a library, and even a museum for antique carriages and wagons. Now right now it's being restored as a federal courthouse. Now they just took these plaques down. See the little squares right there? Those were bronze plaques sitting there with a bunch of men's names listed from Natchez and Adams County. Those are men who died during World War I. Little tan home to your left with double staircase. That's one of our earlier homes in Natchez, built in 1796. This home's also the former home of Linda Lee Mead, Miss America of 1960. She grew up here. This is her family home. Now, important feature of this home is the double staircase there. And this story's kind of true too, but it's true. The story's kind of hokey, but it's true. Get my story out confused again. Back in the 1700s and 1800s, things were a bit more prim and proper than they are today. And back then, you were not supposed to see ladies' ankles. So to fix up the double staircase, she'd go up one side, he'd go up the other, and he wouldn't see anything he was supposed to see. I told you it was hokey, but back then you couldn't see anything like that. Now, unfortunately, not unfortunately, but the pains of ladies, the cleavage is all but falling out of the dress. The God forbid you saw their ankles or anything. Now, ladies in Charleston left, the cleavage is all but falling out of the dress. The God forbid you saw their ankles or anything. Now, ladies in Charleston last month told me the ankles had a lot to do with childbearing, and I was like, I don't want to hear any more. That's good enough for me, so I don't believe you. Now, the home was very tiny. We go past it, you can see the side of it. Torn down for the war effort during World War I. It's over scrap metal. Luckily, it's not torn down.
Myrtle Terrace.
Now, a funny story about this home. It's once owned by Captain Thomas P. Leathers, who's a paddleboat captain. Built by a wealthy cotton merchant by the name of Frederick Stanton, who was born in Liverpool, England, but grew up in Belfast, Ireland. And the home took the name Belfast while the Stanton family was living here. Now, construction began this home in 1851 and was completed in 1857 at a final cost, furnishings included, of $85,000. It was quite a sum for those days. 19 live oak trees were planted while it was being constructed, and 17 remain to this day. The walls of the house are 22 inches thick, the doors are 10 feet tall, all the doorknobs, keyhole, and key guards are all silver plate, and the chandeliers in this house have been custom built for this home. They're bronze chandeliers representing early Natchez, the French and the Indians. Now, Mr. Stanton, unfortunately, died 9 months after moving of yellow fever. He didn't enjoy it very long at all. And the Stanton family themselves remained here until 1899. They sold it to a girls' school. And the girls' school changed the name of this home from Belfast to Stanton Hall, which is called to this day. Now, this home was sold for taxes back in 1938, and that's the Pilgrimage Garden Club purchased it. They paid less than $16,000 for it, less than iron fist would have cost back then. I guess the Great Depression was going on, the upkeep was so tremendous, and it fallen into horrible shape by this time. Now, the Garden Club single-handedly saved this home and did a complete restoration on it, and you can tour it every day. It's got a very nice restaurant behind the house called the Carriage House Restaurant, open for lunch only, 11:30 to 2:30. Yeah, I remember the mini-series North and South Shops and Restaurants, and this opening right here is actually an old carriage driveway. The carriages pull up in there, drop people off, there's an alleyway in the back, there's double doors there that go through, come back around the main street. And our newest restaurant to the right is called Plant Thailand, and we're so excited that sushi's coming to Natchez. You get sushi here now. Y'all like sushi? No.
That's okay.
And my girlfriend loves it about 4 times a week. Let's go eat sushi. She's like, please, no more sushi. I mean, I don't mind eating it, but not that often. Come on, son. Now, you see to your left, Bob Hoffman, real estate agent. All those homes are in Natchez. They're all for sale right now. These are our large hand-developed homes for sale. The problem is it's the upkeep. Once you restore a home, then you can keep on and on and on. Now, you see to your left, Bob Hoffman, real estate agent. All those homes are in Natchez. They're all for sale right now. See, we're just jamming here on Christmas Day. And that tree does not grow out of the ground. Actually, every year, Now, you see to your left, Bob Hoffman, real estate agent. All those homes are in Natchez. They're all for sale right now. See, we're just jamming here on Christmas Day. And that tree does not grow out of the ground. Actually, every year somebody donates a tree out of their front yard or just a yard somewhere they have. They'll cut it down and they'll bolt to an iron stand. That's where it sits till New Year's Eve comes around. Somebody says, is that a real tree? I said, it's a real tree, but if it was growing there, over the years, all the drunks in Natchez would have run over and killed it by then. So it's here just for another couple more weeks. Now, we go across Main Street. When you look to your left, you'll see a large cathedral. Now, we go across Main Street. When you look to your left, you'll see a large cathedral called St. Mary's Minor Basilica. The Catholic church, beautiful church. So it's 1842. There it is over there to your left. They still do mass there twice a day. Now, the monument to your right, it's actually a water fountain. It was dedicated to the city in 1910 by a family to remember the death of their parents. This water fountain to people and animals. And they start Natchez Foundation.
It's their first public school.
Yes, ma'am. And right now it's going in a complete renovation right now. New parking lot, new basement floors, a new elevator. It's going to be very nice to get through with it. Matter of fact, it kind of goes together with a memorial hall I talked about a little while ago, which is kind of connected to it. Israel, this synagogue in the corner to the left. Now, when the Civil War was over with, pretty much no one stopped doing very well, to say the least. And the Jewish families moved to Natchez in the 1860s and 70s and brought all their merch stores with them. And they kept Natchez going. Natchez survived because of the Jewish families. Now today, only 6 families still attend the synagogue for special holidays only, about 3 times a year, a total of 12 people. And once they move on or die off, it'll become a museum eventually. Doors always a lot of people vandals out, but it's beautiful on the inside. And the next church on the left is called Trinity Episcopal Church, built in 1822. And those stained glass windows are the original Tiffany stained glass, the Tiffany families. And that crepe myrtle tree right there in the corner is over 160 years old. They're one of the oldest in the state. You don't see those trees that large. The second French Empire style. This home was the last great house to go in the downtown area of Natchez. Now the actor, George Hamilton, bought this home, fixed by Don Juan Scott. Now Don loved bullfights, and the side yard we're coming to was much larger at one time. It's actually a bullpen, and they conduct bullfights in this yard we're coming to. Now today this yard has a very nice hedge design. It's called a Union Jack, a British flag design. And they were installed in 1950 by interior designer Earl Hart Miller.
But before that, there were bullfights, huh?
Yes, ma'am. Now, about 6 months ago, a great couple in Santa Rosa, California, I was saying about, bought this home just recently. They put restoration on it. Purchased the home, had them moved here and restored. Now, one's a bed and breakfast, and one's a bookstore. Just feed or something?
A sign supposedly explaining Natchez. Looks like it started in 1779. 1798, at least under Spanish control. It was first settled by the French, and then the Spanish took over. Well, we've been walking around Natchez, and this afternoon we'll take some tours of some of the houses. But there was a little old lady who sits at our table who said she heard there was gambling and she wanted to go do it. She doesn't understand how close she is to the gambling, because our boat is moored right there, and right behind it is that Calypso gambling boat. First house is longwood.
Plastered and then wallpapered. The bricks that they made here, they look like bricks you see on your homes today, but they made a special brick here. It's called a 5-sided brick, and it goes like this. Can you see what it's doing?
Yeah.
It makes you point to give you the curve without the brick being pieced. It's all one brick. See it down here better. Y'all might want to swing around a little bit so you can see the chart. This is what the star was supposed to look like. Now we're on the main floor. There was to be 2 dressing rooms, 2 family rooms, dining, breakfast, drawing, reception, hall. We're in the hall right now. Look at the size of your rooms. 4 verandas with steps to lead onto the grounds like this. The stairs that you see, those are workman's stairs. They would have been taken down and the original stairs for the home put here. They would have marble steps, rosewood banisters, ivory spindles. I promise you the best part of the tour is in this next room. Please don't look up until I tell you, and let's step in here. The next floor, an observatory. The next floor is a room that goes all the way around under the dome. Counting the basement, this was to be a 6-story home. They never lived up here. They had the world's largest attic. The little boxes that you see, especially the ones on the side, the little circles were never finished. They would have glass here so the light could go through down into the basement. So Julia had them to put little planter boxes to keep the children from falling through down into the basement and getting hurt. Also, she could open them up and it would suck the hot air straight up out of there through this rotunda to help get some of the hot air out of the basement. Okay, we'll step into this room.
On the second floor of the house, which was never built.
That's where the gazebo was supposed to go.
And you can see
that's the original carriage house to this home. The 2-story house was the house, the 32.
this is a view from the second floor of this house that was never finished. Everybody just lived in the basement.
And see those. But before I do, I've had several of you to ask me about the house. This house stayed in the Nutt family to 1968. Then a gentleman from Austin, Texas, by the name of Kelly McAdams, purchased this home. He came here and stayed almost a year. He said he tried to visualize what these people's dream was as to getting finishing up this house. He tried to walk, talk, live, and breathe this dream, but he never could finish the house. In 1970, he gave the house and 5 acres of land to the garden club here in Natchez. And the garden club was able to purchase the other 85 acres, so the original him giving the house away. It could never be finished. To assure that his wish and he are back together with the home. But there was a stipulation that this would carry it out. It became a national historical landmark and this house will never be finished. He did this for 3 reasons. He wanted people such as you to pass through, see the ruination and devastation the Civil War brought to the South. He wanted you to see what a beautiful dream these people had that was never fulfilled. But most of all, he wanted all of you to realize that you can never live or dream someone else's dream. I've had a wonderful time being with you. When you pass through this room, we're going to go right on out the door onto the veranda. And y'all come back and see us soon.
This is an outside view of Longwood, where we know that everybody just lived in the basement and all the rest of the interior was never finished. The mansion had been completed. You would not have seen any of the brick. You would have seen a facade that was just like we're seeing right now, where they score it and make it look like it's like granite or something.
You're more than welcome to take photographs in the house as long as you can turn your flash off. There's no flash photography. We do have some photographs of the interior for sale in the gift shop. Imagine that. Welcome to Monmouth. Merry Christmas. This house was built by John Hankinson. He and his wife were born in Monmouth County, New Jersey. So when they built their home in Natchez, they named it Monmouth. They finished the house in 1818. At that point, the house was a federal style house. You'll notice all the woodwork and the fan lights. This is all of the federal style. I'll tell you about the changes on the exterior in a few minutes. The Hankinsons lived here from 1818 until 1826. Mr. and Miss Hankinson perished in the largest epidemic of yellow fever in the South's history. The house was then put up for public auction, and there's a marble bust at the back of the hall, and that's who the house was sold to at that auction. That is John Anthony Quitman. We call him the General. He was a volunteer general in the Mexican-American War, but he also served as governor of Mississippi in 1835 and then again in 1850. Now, by 1850, General Quitman was quite an outspoken states' rights activist. And basically his biggest problem was the federal government's involvement in the Mississippi Treasury. So he made his longest lasting political statement by hiring an architect who came to Natchez and stuccoed over all the federal style brick on the outside of the building. They scored it so it appeared to be stone. They added the columns and the portico on the front, the back porch and columns on the back, and then added the back wing. Today the house is considered a Greek Revival style home.
This is the parlor. And this is the mantle they had to put back together. It was broken into 6 or 7 different pieces of marble. Supposedly this table was made in the late 1800s. And this is the dining room area. And of course every place had a fireplace. This is the Christmas tree in their entryway, which is just beautiful. Same thing with the wallpaper. This is also a bed and breakfast. So if you're staying here with the bed and breakfast, this is a room that some of the guests can use.
Hanging above the desk is a copy of a painting that hangs in Washington. It was commissioned by the United States Marine Corps. Quitman was a volunteer Marine in the Mexican-American War. And this was commissioned in 1940. This is when the Marines added the red stripe to the dress uniform. It's called the Blood Stripe, and it's to commemorate those that died at the battles of Chapultepec and Monterey. This is Quitman coming through as his daughters. They married brothers, William and Joseph Lovell. William had passed away. That's Joseph Lovell in the smoking hat. Now all the young people in the photograph are Lovels, and they're all double first cousins. And then you can see what the house looked like in the 1870s. It looked pretty much worse than that in the 1970s.
This is Monmouth. It truly is all dolled up for Christmas. They have built a lot of guest bed and breakfasts around it. And here is Monmouth, as close as I can get. This gives you a pretty good look at what we just saw coming up to it.
With the
Now we're at Stanton Hall. Here's some of the houses that are right next to this house. We couldn't take any photos of the inside of that house, and their gift shop wasn't open. Now this is the USS Kidd, which is a museum which I don't think we're going to be going into to see. But we are now in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And you can see by the little gangplank, there's the USS Kidd. Ken brought up in Bible study there was one individual who used this boat to show the dimensions and length of Noah's Ark. Museum here. This just discusses a little bit about the USS Kidd. We're on a ship. Okay, we are on the USS Kidd, and this is the galley where supposedly they fed 600 people. And let me tell you, am I glad that I didn't have to cook for 600 people. You can tell. You certainly couldn't be a connoisseur. You can see the serving trays that people had. And whatever was made was, you can definitely see this is the crew's mess. Made for a whole large group. Which makes everything pretty close together. Just gone down two flights of these inky-dinky steps. But at least they had an ice cream machine on deck, which I'm sure helped people tremendously, attitude-wise, as you can tell. This is the officers where they slept and where they ate. So if you ever think a little bed is uncomfortable, think about these ones. This is where the chief petty officers ate. And
chief petty officers' mess and quarters.
Well, I must have been sleeping on the sofas then. And here's their little kitchen. Notice what it looked like. If you take a look at these beds, they got a better mattress. They're farther apart, so I guess it paid to have better education. Again, the potty rooms
now we're getting into officers' quarters.
Getting better, but we'll see. We're at the point where it says officers' country, so now we're going to see how much better they lived. Yeah, 2 or 3 to a room. They had like a metal desk, and it looks like they had more drawers. Kind of like the drawers we have on the Mississippi Queen. The executive officer stateroom, and here you can see we get down to 2. We have the famous captain's bed, but they seem to have a little bit more room. Of course, they had a lot more responsibility. On board this cruiser, gives you an idea of what the Well, Baton Rouge is the most current and up-to-date city that we have seen. Because history means a lot in this area. And this afternoon we're going to take a few tours to talk about Huey P. Long and what he did for this area. This is the old state capitol building. You can see it's almost like medieval. And Huey Long built another one, we'll see that. Beautiful fountain. You can tell if you work in this city, in this area. This is like Century City. It's going to be a nice metropolitan environment. Here, Millie, this is for you. We're in Baton Rouge, and here is a Kathleen Babineau Blanco, who is running for governor. Now we're looking at one of the tallest state building in the United States. Huey P. Long built it, and he wanted it to be the tallest building in the United States. Well, as you can see, they aren't small on pomp and circumstance. It's a lot of money spent. Here's the Louisiana State Senate building. And as you can tell, it's all decorated for Christmas.
And then we'll come to the Senate.
Their Christmas tree for this year. This is the Louisiana House of Representatives. Got a little bit more room than the Senate, don't you think? This is the Memorial Hall that's in the middle of the Capitol building. They say that it took 13 months to build. It cost more than $5 million during the Depression to build. They would never be able to build it again. Look at the elevator doors. What they've done is they have put the pictures of the governors on there. 27th floor of the Capitol building. And it does kind of give you a view, give you that. He said he didn't want a building that was going to be taller than the state building. I think he got his wish. Saying there's a lot of different parishes so you have Baton Rouge, but you have a lot of different parishes that go way out. That they are tearing down buildings because they are inefficient energy-wise, and it's costing them too much money just in utilities. And this is from 27 floors up. There's your mighty Mississippi. Got those boats that are gambling boats. See, we are our Delta Queen, no, excuse me, Mississippi Queen is right there. No, it's not doing a good.
Just like, well, we don't. What?
Yeah, there's the state capitol building.
Do you like to roll down the hills?
No, way not.
This is where Huey P. Long is buried, who was a very controversial figure in Louisiana politics. Well, now it sounds like we're going to have our own jazz funeral.
In South Louisiana and New Orleans in particular, as the jazz funeral. Has anybody heard of this? Yes. Yes. So, for those of you who haven't heard about it, what used to happen is, and still does happen, you can still catch this happening, is that when someone dies, the family, friends, and everybody, they would gather together along with the pallbearers and everybody, and they would make their way from the funeral site, either the home or the funeral site, wherever it was happening, for the wake. And they would the pallbearers would carry the body to the cemetery. And what would happen is that being that brass bands were so popular in New Orleans in particular at that time, brass bands would get together and they would be leading the group of friends and family and the pallbearers to the gravesite, and they would be playing something slow and kind of like something of a lament, and there would be no improvisation going on. It would be strict melody. Usually it would be a song like Just a Closer Walk with Thee. I'll probably play that. And it would be more of a time of reflection. And that was the time that you would grieve. Now, once you made it to the burial site, you lowered the body in, the priest would say his words, and once the band and the group of people made it a respectable distance away from the cemetery, then the trumpet player usually would give the call, and the band would strike up in more of a happy, joyous mood. And the reason for this is that you have your time to grieve while going to the cemetery. Once you leave the cemetery, you celebrate that person's passing on. So it would usually be something like when the Saints go marching in, or Disney Ramble, and people would really really get excited and really take a happy, it would make everything more happy and lighter, and you would really think back on those things that made that person's life really enjoyable and all of those good things. And one thing in particular is that it was a story going around that when a jazz funeral was going on and the brass band was playing, when the Saints go marching in, they passed the Catholic Church. And once the priest heard the second line bands playing, when the Saints go marching in that type of hip jazzy style, they stopped the song from being sang in the Catholic Church in New Orleans from then on. But here's the story going on about that. But what we're going to do is, I'm going to start from right here, and everybody's got their handkerchiefs, right? Yeah. Now, I'm sure y'all have seen people for Mardi Gras and everything, when they break their handkerchiefs out and everything, you know what to do. You know what to do. When we get to jamming around here, I don't want anybody to just moping around. I got to see everybody handkerchiefs in the air. You all right?
Right.
Right? Right. Good. So, I'm going to get started, and the way that you can voluntarily take part in this is that if you've had someone who's dear to you, you can reflect on them and anyone, and reflect on those things that made that person's life great. And once we strike it up, you celebrate, and this can be a personal thing for yourself. You celebrate that person's life, and knowing that just by you thinking about them, having them in your memory, that their soul and life lives on because of you.
Here we are. Everybody's waving their bandanas.
Where a number of notable people are buried. It is maintained by our Parks Commission because this used to be a public city graveyard. We're high enough above sea level in Baton Rouge that we can indeed bury folks in their units there on the grounds. This is Magnolia Cemetery, and it is still used today. So, and you will find multiple headstones for generations of folks who are buried in the same crypt.
They can make anything
I wanted you to take part in the toast.
He didn't get a champagne glass.
Who didn't?
All right. Let's get a champagne glass. I ain't having
Read that I should make a toast at this time to each and every one of you. And since we're cruising the lower Mississippi River of the Deep South, I shall make this toast in the truest of Southern tradition. And my toast for you goes like this. Here's to you all, y'all. And I'd like you to know that my sentiments are honest and real. May your days be as bright and your hearts be as light as the spray from our big paddle wheel. To everyone.
Cheers. You know, keeping in with tradition, it's time to toast the captain. So one more time, raise your glasses. All right, now folks, stick around. Your dining crew has cooked something special up for you. So stick around after your dessert. Bon appetit.
He said, well, why can't I come? I said, well, I didn't know what his name was, other than his name was Howard. That's all I'd ever heard.
So at least you didn't call him Barky.
So when he got there, before he got there, I told her family, I said, now this boy is coming. And I don't know what his name is. So when he comes, I'm going to say, this is Howard, that's all I'm going to say. So that's what happened. Until this day, I was never introduced.
Out of my champagne!
Let's take small bites.
I can't see that.
Where's the guys from?
This is our last stop, which is Homa's house. A lot of stuff. It looks like it was just recently purchased. Oh, we've got some.
The tour guide, when you get the tour, will take these other two. So let me get you a couple of lanyard plates. 1 second.
This is at the entrance. This is one of the fountains. This is a beautiful place. And I've got a new necklace to add. It shows, I'll show you later. This is the house where they filmed Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte. And it's recently been purchased, but it's just gorgeous. That's the house. And I swear right now I see a bunch of smoke coming out of one side of it, but we'll find out. And really, to think that this is December 27th and this weather is so beautiful down here, this has really been a beautiful weather, a trip with beautiful weather for it being Christmas. This tells you a little bit about Homa's house. Everybody was always making those arches and those alleys. Here's another set of oaks. Looks like going up to the house. Another view of the house. And then you'll see that it's got an area where a docent is going to be speaking to us. It has like a little house over here. And it looks like what they've done is they have redone the roof. You can tell that they must have really done put some money into this place recently. Okay, Ken told me this was a tavern, so I guess they wanted to keep it. And I guess this is where the men got to go? Who knows?
Similar. This gentleman just asked about it. These are called garçonnières. In the mid-1800s, when the young boys became the age of 13, 14, 15, they were totally removed from the main home and given their own apartment. I think parents were brilliant back then. Perfect timing, don't you think? You know, Homa's house was the largest sugar plantation in America. 98,000 acres. When you walk by, if you walked in the front, you saw that very large bell. What they would do is put large bells in the fields, and that would tell the workers when it was time to come in for lunch and when the day was over. You can ring that bell if you desire. But I'm going to tell you something. If you ring it, you better run fast. These are sugar kettles.
Ghosts coming for dinner.
These were used in the process of the crystallization. They would take the juice from the sugar cane, put in the kettles, build a large fire with wood, and boil that juice for hours and hours, constantly stirring, scraping off the debris. After it would cook down in that kettle, you'd put it in another kettle, and then another kettle. But now they're used for decorations. In fact, Mr. Kelly, the new owner of Homus House, came through my tour. And I was telling my people, I got a sugar kettle in my front yard, but I got goldfish in mine. Came to work the next day, he put goldfish in mine. They are not of the period that date 1927, but they're so typical Louisiana with the cattails. Now there is a story about these iron gates. When Mr. Kelly went to the auction, he found out there was another gentleman interested in these gates. So he was walking around, listening, trying to find out who it was. And guess who it was? Elton John.
Oh my.
He wanted them for his condominium. But it must not have fit because Mr. Kelly got the gates. Let's go into roses. We have our tea roses, our English roses, our climbing roses. And of course, being the southern lady that I am, my favorite is the Confederate rose. Beautiful. There is no ropes. You walk through each room just like you are Mr. Kelly's guest. The first structure that was built was the French cottage, the terracotta. It was built in 1770 by Alexander Latil. He was a Frenchman. But Louisiana was under the Spanish government. He did get a land grant. But this land was also the Homus Indians' hunting ground. And it is said that he paid 4 cents an acre. From the lower window back was the second part. That was William Donaldson. We have Donaldson built right across the Mississippi River. Carolina, and he preferred South Carolina to Louisiana. And all you have to do is come back in July to understand where he came from. But his daughter, Caroline, and her husband, John Smith Preston, came to run the plantation. And she left a beautiful plantation in South Carolina. So when she got here, she said, this is not going to work. So she added the 2 front parlors, the 2nd floor, the 3rd floor, the cupola, the belvedere, the widow's walk, whichever you desire to call it, and the beautiful columns. She was a smart woman, huh?
Right.
She had some money, I think.
I think so too. What kind of a...
For $1 million. I had no idea they had that much money back then, but they did. Mr. Burnside came to America as a poor Irish immigrant, 12 years old, in fact. And he met another Irishman, and they were both brilliant businessmen. They opened a business in New Orleans, a wholesale business, and right before the war, they sold their business for $4 million. And I discovered they were also one of the first few men that had long-term credit. So when your Visa card gets out of sight, you know who to blame, John Burnside. You are going to see a lot of visual aid. Murals were very, very popular. They told a story. Linwood Plantation even had an African safari with tigers, even a native woman sacrificing her child. So the new owner said, well, I want a mural to tell our story of Homus House. So what he did, he went into the sugarcane fields with his camera, took pictures, and then presented the pictures to the artist. So if you back away from the mural and you look at it, you're going to see all kinds of Louisiana garments. We have our crawfish, we have our rabbits, our raccoons, snakes. I love the ceiling too, isn't that beautiful? I had a couple yesterday come through my tour, and they had an old home in Picayune, Mississippi. And when they saw this mural, they said, that's what we're going to do in our home. The hallway is so hard to decorate. She really had the money. But he did name Homus House. And you know, at one time, the Homus Indians, the chief of the Homus Indians was a woman. And her husband was a medicine man. So I tell all my ladies, behind every good woman is a good man, huh? Homer's house china, this came from the Miles family. When you go upstairs, there is 4 bedrooms. There is the Miles bedroom, the Hampton bedroom, the Burnside bedroom, and of course the Betty Davis suite. Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte was filmed here, the outside. So when you're on the gallery, when you walk outside, just make believe you're Betty Davis and you've got that gun ready to go. They'll even show you where the graveyard scene was on the other side. And they also have some other funny stories to say. I'm going to back up a little bit and let y'all walk. In 1847, this map was made. It was given to John Smith Preston. They found this map in the attic when they put air conditioning in home. Date. This is called Homer's Point. When you're on the gallery, you're going to see the Mississippi River, how it goes directly north and then directly south. But what is unique about this map and special is the 1840 census. It shows how many white people were in this area, how many slaves was in this area, and how many free people of color. Now, we Louisiana people know we're different. I'm a transplant. I am from Arkansas, but I've lived here most of my life. In Orleans, they had 18 to 19,000 free people of color, and they had 23,000 slaves. We are a gumbo of people. We had very wealthy free people of color who owned plantations and were extremely wealthy and owned slaves. You know, I did not know that till I became a tour guide. Slowly, history is coming out, huh? Well, Louisiana is different.
I'll lock up my camera, that's why I'm asking. I'll find out in just a second.
Probably it's okay without a flash.
I think it's the flash. In any of the places that I have been, it's been the flash that has been the problem because it wears down.
Would have been the dining room. Again, there would be another room on the other side that we will go into. The home was really changed in 1940. We do not know why the man that bought it then, he took out all the original moldings, the chandeliers and everything. Our present owner did go to Carolina, to the Hampton estate, and copied the moldings in their homes. And we feel like that was probably what would have been in this home at that time. We do know chandeliers were in the home because when we put these in, the pipes were still in the ceiling that had held up the original chandeliers. Now, we have our Indian here. I'm sure you were told that the house was named for the homeless Indians. Well, at that time, when the people would come from Europe and they would go back and talk about the Indians, they never talked about their features, their facial features. They would only talk about their clothes. So we have an Indian with the European features and dressed in the Indian fashion. Our mantles, we have 4 original black marble mantles that are downstairs in the public rooms downstairs. This painting here, he wanted to own one of these homes, and when he found out that this home was for sale, they said he was the first in line, and he had his furnishings all ready to put in the home. Now the pocket doors, like I said, would have opened up into this room. The portraits on each side, that's Caroline Hampton Preston, her husband John Preston, and they were the ones that finished the home as it is today. The portraits you see over are during the course of sitting, their conversations, and they did fall in love and they were married. Now the young ladies in the home at that time were taught how to play a musical instrument, either the harp or the piano. We do have a Steinway here that would date back to the early 1800s. The mantle, that is Julie Monet, the niece of Edouard Monet, your famous French painter. And the story goes that one of his apprentices painted this picture. And I guess evidently she liked the finished product of the furniture as well as it make mattresses out of it also. Now the ladies after the meals would have come to this room, and I said probably discuss fashions and the gossip of the day, and the gentleman would have gone to the other parlor, Dr. Cossack. He owned it up until the present, when they sold it, they auctioned it off in June or May. I think everybody can get in if y'all just move around.
This is
I really don't know.
pieces that has quite a bit of
Now,
information.
look, their tobacco. The card table under the portrait could have very easily have been in here at that time. As you know, a lot of these homes were won and lost over a game of cards. The portrait on the man on the wall, that is of Andrew Byrne. Now, Andrew Byrne is the one that adopted John Burnside when he came from Ireland, and he was an orphan. Well, this man did have one son, and when he was 18 and 19 years old, he sent John and his son to New Orleans to open up a mercantile business. They said that they were the first ones to extend credit as we know it today on time. Of course, it prospers. And when they sold their business, they sold it for $4 million. And John took his half, purchased this home. The clock is a regulator clock. The pendulum has mercury in it, and that is supposed to assure accurate time, no matter what the atmosphere might be. Now, when John Burnside had a home in New Orleans, they covered a city block, and the Union Jack flew over it, and it also over this home too. He never replenished his British citizenship. So when General Butler, during the Civil War, wanted to commandeer his home for his headquarters, he know that he was a British subject and he could not take his property. We feel like this is what spared this home, because when the gunboats went up and down the river, all these plantations were fired upon, and this one flew the Union Jack. So that is probably one reason this one was not fired upon also. Now, Burnside loved to play billiards. He had a game room. This is not his table, but it is similar to what would have been in here at that time. Bring in, and as we say, every day when we come, there's something new been added. We're still in training too. A lot of the things we have to be told about and why he has them. But the two side tables were British game tables, and they could have very easily have been in this home at that time. Now we'll go into the, originally this home, the hall would have extended this way. These two rooms would have been square. Oh, they originally.
This is the stairwell that you can see going up all three ways. Okay, now this is where we are up on the second floor of Thomas' house, and you can see our boat.
Now, as we said before, originally the home had 24 oaks, 12 on each side. These homes were set back a good way from the river, all of them. But the river has changed so many directions. And of course, when they move the levee back, it takes more land. If we have one home down the road here, San Francisco, you might have saw it. But if you came in late last night, you probably didn't. But it's sitting right on the river road. And if they ever have to move the levee back again, if they can't put a ring levee around it, they will lose that home too. A lot of them have been lost to the river.
This is truly beautiful.
Of course, it was to your benefit to take care of it. Now we'll go down at this end. This one over here is really older, but a few years ago it split because you pruned it. You need that to balance it, you see. They've got to have a weight to balance it, or they will split over here.
Here's the second floor of the house. First portion of the home that was built, which was the Spanish portion, before they added on the two other portions. The Garçonniers. So it looks like it's a little apartment that's up on top with an area in the bottom to be able to relax in the gardens. And as we heard before, we were told that when the boys got to be a certain age, they got sent off to their own apartments. This is probably one of the apartments where they lived. We're back. We're going to be on dry land in just a second. This is where they drop us off in New Orleans, our port of New Orleans. We are definitely in the heart of New Orleans. This is Port Charles. See, we're not leaving till 6:40 tonight, so we are enjoying a little bit of the city. We're holding our bags. I'm not sure if I'd want to live up there knowing that it's pretty humid. It's a beautiful day today, though, I'll tell you. The bird that's up in that second story there. This is a second-story building, and obviously they're taking up residence with everybody else. This is for you. I'm at the Palm Court Jazz Cafe. They are closed this time of year. But you can tell they've had a lot of different people show up at this place. And they really talked about here about the French really loving jazz. Well, it looks like somebody decided to decorate their balcony as a big old piano. As you can see, there's all the keys. Here's the French market. Well, we saw the treasures of Egyptian antiquities at the New Orleans Museum of Art. Very interesting, and I did enjoy it. Now we're waiting for the bus to take us back to near the port, to the French Quarter. Here we got good old Beauregard, who heads up this park. Inside these homes that look so old, they have some beautiful interior gardens. And you can see it here. So, and lots of ferns. Lots and lots of ferns and gardens in the middle.
Be able to sit upside down.
There's Jimmy Buffett. Well, we are at Margaritaville and we're sitting on the balcony. Seeing all the cars going by. Okay, Ken's ordering a fish BLT, and I'm doing a Cajun chicken BLT, and I'm having a dirty Bahama Mama drink. Well, we're back on the trolley going back towards the wharf so we can get the taxi to get to the airplane. Got a little treat for both of you guys, and so we're waiting for her. She's powdering her nose. She'll be right back. She told us to tell everybody not to put their money in the trolley until she got back.
Sometimes,
well, for safety reasons.
Yeah, when you pull out your money to make change, then at night. The guy went to rob him. He told the guy, he said, I just got robbed. He keep his money in his sock. Drive his cars up and down every day. There's a lot of security around here. French market, plain clothes.
That's good.
It's just all kind of a combination of different. Stop number 5, the House of Blues, Hooter. Next stop, Canal Street, Aquarium. Harris Casino, St. Charles Street Car.
It's a statue called Mother River, and it's at, and you can tell that there's a fountain there, but guess what? It's not showing it that much now. Here we have Mr. Grosnick against this fountain, and I'll show you when you go around how it's got different, it's showing is all of the different things that happen at this port. The steamboat, the cruise ship, the tugs, another form, maybe the Coast Guard, great city of New Orleans, the foundry work they do here. Very pretty. This is what it looks like, person on the back.